All right, so I know I haven't made a YouTube video in a long time, and I was kind of thinking about, how do I get back to the video making biz. I recently had a podcast collab I was going to do with another content creator, but long story short, that probably won't be happening anytime soon, so I think I have to shut the whole thing down. But it had me think about a couple of things. A couple of things happened, and it made me it kind of inspired me to do a video. Fucking DBDR came back, and it's like, well, a lot of these people, they do like videos of themselves talking in their car and all that kind of stuff, right? So I thought, maybe instead I could try to make a similar kind of video style where I like play a video game or something, and then talk about something that's on my mind. Talk about some real type of shit. So I'm gonna go ahead and give that a whirl and see whether or not you guys enjoy the content. So, in the comments, whether or not this unedited style of content, oh my god, edit your videos, but like, it's interesting to you or not. So, one of the things I want to talk about is relationships, especially on the internet, and just the nature of human interactions, right? How people interact with each other, pattern recognition, and just being careful who you trust, right? Because I just feel like I'm not naming any names here because it's private shit on internet drama, and I'm not gonna like tell everybody's business, but it just had me think and this is especially concerning for anyone who might find themselves in a similar type of situation where maybe your boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse or something might be abusive towards you, right? That you have to be able to look for signs of potential abuse, especially ones that are psychological. So let me paint a picture for you, right? Imagine you are a grown adult and somebody tells you you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that, and I'm going to make you do things against your will, right? And it's like, well, do you have any control over your own life if some asshole that you met online, by the way, can just tell you to do stuff like that? That's just really strange to me. I don't know, because what that tells me is you might be subject to abuse. You might be actually in a psychologically abusive relationship. Because see, what people need to understand, right? When another sign of abusive manipulation tactics, right, is either me or them. Like, do you love them more than me? Fucking take your option. It's either me or them. And this reminds me of a interaction I had way back in the day too with one of my older friends, as far as like how it's gay for you to have ultimatums with the people, because I remember I was trying to get one of my friends to talk to me, and he wouldn't talk to me, whatever, because there was like a misunderstanding, and I felt like I had to use an ultimatum in order to get him to talk to me. And I remember his brother was getting on my case about how I was fucking gay, and it's like like contextually speaking at the time it made sense to do the ultimatum thing, because I just really wanted him to talk to me, because it's like I want to keep my friend where he's not like talking to me and shit, right? So it's like I need to do something to actually get him to talk to me. But generally speaking, the problem with ultimatums from a psychological standpoint is that it literally puts someone that you're supposed to care about in a rock and a hard place, right? It puts them in it's like, well, you either choose between this person that you care about, or you choose between me, and which one of those people matter most to you? Someone that actually cares about you and respects you as a human being with their own autonomy is not going to force you to make decisions like that. That doesn't make any sense. So another thing too, right? Based on this thing I'm talking about, this incident that happened, is you don't know those people, you don't trust them, they're not your friends, right? And it's funny because this is an internet drama stuff, but it's like the other person involved, the guy telling this person that you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't talk to these people, was also somebody they met on the internet. So it's kind of like, well, if they don't know us, if they, or your acquaintance, I mean, I could say the same thing about you, because, you met under the same circumstances. And when they got together, I'm assuming there's no pretense of like, oh, you're going to tell me what to do. I should also stop being vague about the genders here, because there's another point I want to make about misogyny. I know that chuddies and certain types of people I have watching my channel probably won't agree with what I'm about to say, but it's true, it needs to be said. Just from my personal experience alone, my anecdotal evidence, from what I've seen, when a relationship falls flat, just anecdotally, not saying that all women are perfect, but usually it's the man's fault that the relationship folds. That's been my experience. Because there's this certain type of guy, terminally online, probably overweight, believes in weird conspiracy theories and stuff like that. I mean, that can describe surprisingly, a lot of people. A surprising amount of people fall into that category, ironically enough, not just one particular person, but that they don't really seem to respect women as people, because they don't consider women's opinions and to be valuable, because they're women. So you're just a stupid woman, so what the hell would you know, right? And that leads to these types of situations where it's like, well, it's my way or the highway. I control the household. Like, the woman is not a partner; she's more like a pet, right? So if you're in a situation where you're this guy's pet, but you're not really his wife, well, what the hell, right? So that's a bad situation, and I don't think I really need to elaborate further why that is. So for anyone in particular that might be in a particular situation like this, you need to think about it's like I don't know, counseling or possibly getting out of there or some other thing, because that shouldn't be a thing that happens. You shouldn't have some guy, regardless of any difference in age. That's another thing too. I notice a lot of people like prey on people who are younger or whatever. I'll get into that as well. I think there's a pecking order regarding like how people go about picking partners and stuff like that. But yeah, you really shouldn't be in a situation where a man just bosses you around. And I understand, traditional values and women, staying home and doing the cooking and blah, blah, blah. There's a difference between traditionalism and misogyny. Those two things are not interchangeable. I know a lot of, the quote unquote progressive and blah, 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 might tell you otherwise. But no, like, you can, talk about women's hypergamy and, your behavioral traits and stuff, and acknowledge that women are women and men are men, and genders are different, while also respecting those differences and not treating women like shit. And what I'm talking about is the type of men, incels, usually as they're called, who take this position that, I'm red-pilled on how women behave, and they take that as a means to start just treating women like shit. They might even start hitting them, maybe possibly at a later date, and you presumably want to get out of there before we start getting hit on, literally hit on. So what this recent incident, had me thinking about is, like, do people, how do I put this delicately? I feel like there is this subset of people that like specifically target certain types of demographics of women, right? Let's say, we have this whole meme like, oh, there's no such thing as a femcel, femcels don't exist, and I would say that's like a half truth. If you were to be normie enough, it's like be socially acceptable, like if you weren't socially awkward or whatever, put on a pretty dress or something, you probably could get a guy, right? But the thing about the whole femcel thing is that it's less about not being able to get a guy and more about the quality of the guy that you can get. And that's another thing that really opened my eyes, like because I was always femcels don't exist, and maybe you're LARPing, stuff, because with these women, obviously you can get dates, right? But after the things that I saw, right, it made me think like, maybe what's actually happening here is, women can't, like, who find themselves in this femcel shit, like, they can't find love, and when they do find a partner, the partner is bad. Like, so think about it like this, right? Let's say you're an incel, right? You're a dirty little incel chud boy, you smell like shit, you're fucking 412 pounds or some shit, you might be, an obese, land whale loser, right? Who believes in weird conspiracy theories that have nothing backing them up. And you might think thinking to yourself, well, who do I, implant my seed with so I can continue, my generations of, whatever the fuck my crazy so-called beliefs or culture, right? So one of the things you could easily do in that situation is go for someone who you consider to be, beneath you, weak, willed in certain ways. Someone who's easier to manipulate, right? Because there's always this meme of like, dating down, men date down, for example. Let's say, I'll date fat bitches, so it'll be easier for me to get dates. So I'll date a paraplegic, so it'll be easier for me to get in there because Stacy doesn't want you because you're a piece of shit. So you date down so you can get someone. That's kind of like the idea of what's going on here. So in a similar sense, like femcells don't necessarily, like, they definitely have more options than guys for just getting into relationships, but you could technically get in a relationship with a land whale or some shit, but usually that's another thing I want to talk about as far as misogyny, but you can get into a relationship with any woman, right? You can find a woman. It's not difficult just to find women, but it's one thing to find a woman, it's another thing to get a good quality woman. And likewise, it's another thing to get a good quality man. So I don't think my perspective on femcells has somewhat changed a bit after this altercation. I think it's not an issue of can, it's more of an issue of should. Can I get a good relationship? Can I find a man that respects me, or is every man that tries to get with me super fucking disrespectful person? So because of that, right? What I think is happening here is that certain types of guys, with certain types of belief systems, will go after, these femcells, these downtrodden, socially awkward girls. Maybe they're a little young and naive, they don't know what's going on, right? And they will then try to riz them and whatever, love bomb them or whatever, I don't know, whatever tactics they use, right? And then they proceed to inject their ideologies into them, because people in general, but especially women, because female nature, women's opinion changes like the wind changes direction, because they're followers and they don't have their own opinions. That's kind of true, but like you're right for the wrong reasons type of thing. Like, it's not necessarily that women are all androids and like stupid. But, women do kind of work more in packs and everything. It's part of female nature, right? But like I said earlier, female nature is not an excuse to just shit on women or try to abuse or use women for your own ends, right? But yeah, so because of that, because women tend to be more pack oriented and following the leader and everything like that, it's easy to take women who are in this socially unacceptable position where they're socially awkward, nerdettes basically, and they might have like a checkered past with your family or what have you. And some men will target girls who have this and take advantage of that and start injecting, let's say, not C. I don't know if it's going to get censored by YouTube or anything, but certain belief systems, whatever, and they don't really question it because if they're young and impressionable, now they're parroting stuff that they heard someone say. It's like, I didn't believe this until like my boyfriend or husband told me this, and it's like, yeah, but that was never true to begin with. And just to talk about the guys for a second, this is a similar instance where you might be a guy, you're blinded by the coochie, you're simping, and this woman takes you for a ride, takes all your money, or has you believe crazy things. I've seen like some of my friends in the past, people I'm not friends with anymore, unfortunately. Come on, like that shit wasn't gonna fly. But throw me under the bus for coochie. And basically try to pretend to be someone that they're not. It's like I have one of my previous friends. He like started going like full hardcore feminist, and I used to be a feminist back in the day. I know that might actually deter some of you, but I grew up in a left-leaning household, and I got to see a lot of the stuff I complain about in some of my other videos, as far as like feminism or whatever, like woke stuff or whatever. It's stuff that mainly comes from personal experience, not just a game has a black character in it, right? So I got a very unique perspective growing up in a single mother household, well, not just, my mother, but also like, my aunt and grandmother and stuff. And, I had like a lot of female role models growing up. So I got to see a lot of things strictly from the female perspective, for better or worse. And while I would later be, drop my, feminism ideology, whatever the fuck, because, they teach you things, or you have to do things the way that we taught you to do it, even if that's not, how the world really works, or, it's just not true, because I kind of had to learn the hard way that feminism doesn't really give a shit about men. But what I didn't learn is the many ways that women do get fucked over, like the husband leaving them, and my mother talking to me about how embarrassing it is to get cheated on and all these other types of things. So, yeah, I've seen quite a bit when it comes to that type of shit. And I just find it very interesting how, we talk a lot about the red pill and how to rizz up girls and blah blah blah, but at the end of the day, it really does seem to me, just again from my own personal experience, that it's the guy that usually fucks it up. But where was I going? I'm rambling a little bit. I apologize. That's something I have a tendency to do. But I was bringing up the whole feminism thing because my friend at the time, the friend I was talking about before, who sold me out for coochie, he had was trying to pretend to be a feminist and all this kind of shit to impress this one girl, and I'm just like, dude, I know who you are. Like, I know more about feminism than you do. So, like, I know you're faking it. And I called him out on that. It's like, that's not who you are. Like, you like to make sex jokes. You do all this other stuff. I mean, like, that's not who you are. And he didn't even know how to. He didn't even know how to respond to it. He's pretending like he cares what this woman has to say. And it's like, you're just pretending so you can get some coochie. That's what I'm saying, is that there's instances where people will pretend to be something they're not so they can fit in, or get people to like them or whatever. And usually what ends up happening, what I'm noticing, is that that usually tends to backfire, especially when you try to get the good graces of people that don't respect you or are not worth respecting. There are certain groups of people that, especially if they don't like women, they don't like women too much, that you really, as a woman, you really shouldn't try to invade their quote-unquote male space, so to speak. Not because women shouldn't be there, women are allowed, no girls are allowed, but they're toxic environments for women. Like, they're actually like bad environments for women. Some of these spaces online, because you just, all you have to do is look at the way they talk about women to understand this. Now imagine you get married to one of those people. I could never imagine that. Now, I mean, if you're in a position like that, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. You might be fucked. You might have to think about, what are you gonna do going forward to make sure that you don't, that you don't end up getting your ass beat in Tekken 3. Let's just say that. Let's say, like, there's my character with Toulouse right now, to Eddie Gordo. I mean, he's black. I mean, I don't know. I'm not supposed to. I'm not trying to say too much stuff. I want to keep it somewhat anonymous. But let's just say that I don't know. What do the wife beating, like domestic? What do domestic violence statistics say as far as like which race is more likely to hurt the other? Like which race of people has more instances of domestic violence? I legitimately do not know. I would assume that it would be brown skins and stuff like that. But that's what people tell you. But that's what they want you to think. There's certain types of people that push agendas. And like I said, like they take young impressionable people and they tell you, the Browns did this, the space who cares, control the base, the shield, did this and that, right? And it's like, well, is that something you know? Is that something that you were told? You have to be careful where this information comes from, and be careful, like, did you actually know who you're even talking to and where they got that information from? There's certain types of people, there's certain types of trends where if you even hear people talk about, space who cares, and you notice that, they don't really have their shit together and aren't particularly, economically enchanted, maybe not the best looking people. There's an archetype to the type of people that talk about this type of shit, like you're never gonna see a Chad Thundercock out here talking about space who can, because that's usually something that happens when the society, the system has failed you. You fall through the cracks, and I would say that the ever increasing number of radicalized young men on the internet is a symptom of a system that inherently fails them. It's especially problematic for white men in particular, because since they're white men, they're the evil pressure class, they lack the oppression Olympics privileges in certain, conversations regarding to identity politics that would allow them to, be, I identify as a marginalized group. At least there's like some level of solidarity when you are, black or whatever. Allegedly, those crime statistics say something differently, but allegedly there's some solidarity because we got to stand up against the evil white man, the white devil, and you can feel like you're getting vilified quite often with the type of shit that's being flung regarding those types of people. If you're white and it's like you feel disenfranchised, so it's like, and then you get introduced to white identity politics. That's what it is, wing nationalism, wing nats, that's what they call them, that little slang term. It's just identity politics for white people. The whole Black Panther shit, but for whites. They'll tell you that, that shit was actually based and cool. It was cool to like have identity politics and stuff. It's like, okay, but you do realize that left-leaning people, they say the same stuff. They're racist, just in a different way. Instead of saying that brown people commit all these crimes and are stupid, and blah blah blah. Instead, what they argue is that people, can't, these poor people can't pull themselves up by their bootstraps, and can't be held accountable because poor brown person, we should just allow them to kill whites or whatever. It's like, okay, I hope I don't get demonetized, or I'm not worried about monetization, but get the video taken down. But like, the point I'm trying to get at is that it's two sides of the same coin. The problem in and of itself is identity politics. Like, identity politics in and of itself is cringe. And what happens, right, when these people who have these identity politics that they want to inject into young, vulnerable people, men and women alike, they, find them or create content, whatever, to start to indoctrinate them, basically. They start, dog whistling and stuff. I remember there was a similar incident back during, the OG Gamergate, whatever, this channel, this old channel I used to watch, Edgy Sphinx. He was pushing, race realism, but it started off as, oh, hey gamers, I hate censorship, I hate the leftists, and oh, by the way, did you know that 20% of the crimes are committed by only 13% of the population? It's interesting. This particular race of people are responsible for all the violent crime. And you know where they're trying to get to with that every time, not so subtly implying that, brown people are violent and, they can't be trusted, they can't, intermix. But, a lot of the times when people talk about these narratives about, race mixing and whatnot, miscegenation, terms that these people often don't even know, because that's they bank on you not knowing what this stuff means so they can educate you, so they can red pill you, right? So about that, right? So because they push these narratives on people that don't know any better, like that's how they spread that shit. That's how they get you to believe things that are antithetical to real life. And the internet isn't real life. I don't know why people think that, oh, I read online, that means it's true. I've read multiple stories online that I knew for a fact were untrue, on news articles and stuff like that. So it's insane to me that people will just believe shit without any proper evidence, or really asking where it come from, or how important it is, or how relevant it is to me as a person. I just find it funny how you get JQ'd, as it were, and you don't magically get any richer or thinner. It's very strange. But yeah, so I know that sounds like I'm getting off topic, rambling a bit. But what I'm talking about here is an issue with trust and online interactions, and the type of precarious situations you could find yourself in when you end up trusting the wrong people. And this is kind of relevant to the situation that I had to notice with my friends and stuff recently. And it's kind of like a wowie zowie. So with that in mind, right, trying to keep it nice and vague, keep people anonymous and everything, right? What I have noticed too is like this idea, just go back to the idea of trust for a minute, right? You don't know who you're talking to online. These people are not your friends, even though you met this person online who's telling you that these people online are not your friends. That's a form of a psychological manipulation, because and it's perfect too. It's a brilliant ploy because it's a half truth. I could easily do like horrible things with the information that my friends have told me about themselves and their personal lives and stuff, and to do stuff to embarrass them. It's easily doable. Easily doable. Just make a document or whatever. Might even be able to make a document on like a fake name or some shit. Be like, it was me, you know. Like, as a general rule of thumb, you probably shouldn't like tell people all your business, or only tell them things that you are comfortable with them knowing, you know. Because something could technically happen, right? If somebody turned out to not be who you thought they were. But what if I told you that that happens a lot? That happens quite a bit. Like you could meet someone and think, oh man, he's the one for me. You even get hitched to the guy. It turns out that not who you thought you were. That happens all the time. So yeah, that's technically a true statement, but like. The guy saying that statement isn't necessarily trustworthy either, right? Like, so they say that stuff because it forces the victim to be emotionally dependent on the person. So let's say you don't have any friends, you don't have any family, presuming you're like disconnected from your family, right? Which is another curious issue, right? You can be disconnected from your family, and now you're dependent on this guy for all of your shit. You have to, you depend on him for money. You're dependent on emotional support, housing, all this shit. Like everything has to go through him. And that's what I mean by misogyny, right? It's like it's treating women as property, as a form of ownership. Because the woman in question doesn't have her own autonomy anymore. She can't like really make her own decisions. And I know we talk about hypergamy and women run off with other dudes, doing a better deal. I mean, granted, you could just be a better person and work on yourself, so you don't have to worry about that. But if you're married to somebody, if you're like a faithful person, like you shouldn't be going after girls that would do that to you anyway. Like, it is partially your responsibility as well to find a good girl who wouldn't do that type of shit to you, right? But you shouldn't manipulate those women to make them less likely to do the thing that you're worried that they're going to do, right? And I just find it very interesting when you say stuff like, I don't trust people and, fuck people. I don't believe in this found family, whatnot. I mean, isn't technically, wives and husbands found family? They're not related to you. You don't know them like that. There's no blood connection to you, especially when that person isn't necessarily the same race as you, even if they have the same similar skin color, not the same person as you. Right? Then you turn around and then you're like, yeah, I don't believe in that shit. But like, then who is your spouse supposed to be? Because do you actually trust them like that? What do you actually like about them like that? You need to have conversations with people and get a clear understanding. It's like, okay, well, for a couple, why are we a couple? There's a phrase that kind of gets under my skin when I talk to like couples online. I mean online in my internet escapades, when they're like, oh, I like so and so for their personality or something. But it's like, what does that mean? Is it like, oh, you like the same video games, or like they make you laugh? What personality? Because that's vague, right? That's often very vague. And it's usually in response to me talking about what's attractive about them physically, because I do worry about people getting into relationships with people that they don't actually appreciate and physically. I'm not saying you should only date people strictly on looks, but a combination of looks and personality. I don't know. I feel like if you can't kiss your girl or hold your man and you actually tell them that they're attractive and like initially mean it, there's a problem there. And sometimes an emotional connection can create more of an attraction. Attraction isn't just looks, that might get you through the door. That's like the more feral, animalistic part of attraction, getting into a relationship. But whether or not somebody makes you feel a certain way, that closeness, that bond is what keeps it together. But you have to ask where that bond comes from. And I think that tying back into the whole thing about abuse, with people who have the intent to abuse these women who are insecure about their lot in life, what they end up doing is they go after the quote-unquote ugly woman that no one else wants, even though I personally feel like these types of women are just kind of just normal. I mean, I don't know. I go to public stores, Walmart, whatnot. Have you ever seen people at Walmart? Okay, maybe that's not a good example. That's basically like calling somebody ugly, because people at Walmart is just making fun of weird-looking people. But what I'm trying to say is that the average person is not like an anime character. They go after the girl that nobody wants. and then they, you know, mold her into, you know, the perfect specimen. It's it's pretty cringe. It's pretty bad, or as we used to say back in the day, gay. So, in conclusion, because I don't want to ramble too long, I want to try to make these videos maybe around 15, 20 minutes tops. I'm trying to go for more, you know, DVD-R style of video. And I don't intend to do like black pill content per se, where I just talk about how everything is terrible and you should just, you know, act, as the kids like to say. I want to do some hopeful stuff too, some white pill stuff. You know, I mainly want to talk about like my thoughts on certain things and why you should be wary of narratives. You know. Well, in conclusion, the point I'm trying to get at here is I just noticed a pattern where certain types of people are just who are vulnerable to rhetoric and stuff. That they get targeted by people. You know. These poor women get targeted. You know, sometimes the men too. In fact, you know, I remember my brother told me a story about one of his friends who got targeted by this one woman, way older than the guy too. Ended up like introducing him to like conservative stuff or whatever the fuck. You know, using her feminine wiles to change him, and then all of a sudden he was like a different type of person after that. And a lot of the time it's because they form this connection with the person that is essentially, you know, abusing them. They don't recognize it as abuse because, you know, love bombing is somehow, oh, you don't know how softly he hits me more alone, you know, and you're going to fuck around and end up in really, you know, bad marriages and stuff. You know, that could be 5 years down the tubes where, you know, you might as well file the divorce papers now before it gets any worse. I forgot who said this, like where I heard this, but I know like one of the YouTube channels I watch about says something about like most most marriages don't last more than like 2 years or something now. Just it's a really, you know, black-killing statistic about modern day marriage. Now, I'm not saying, you know, don't get married and have kids, because, you know, like that's a whole nother can of worms. Like, oh, don't have kids, just buy Funko Pops and, you know, play video games and rot all day. No, you should try to, you know, find happiness. That's actually what you want to do with your life, and that's your decision to make whether you want to have kids or not. But I feel like when people specifically encourage you not to do it, it's that might be a little concerning, but we won't talk about that right now. But yeah, so it just says to me like something is wrong with the dating landscape and how relationships are formed. The divorce statistics I can't speak are actually that bad, right? But yeah, I mean, I guess that's pretty much it. I just, you know, I think people need to be really aware of pattern recognition and be able to tell us, okay, this guy tells me things, I'm supposed to agree with it, or whatever, you know, my boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever the fuck, they say things, I'm supposed to just believe it. Yeah, believe it. And it's like, and if I don't believe them, if I don't do what they tell me to do, there'll be consequences. And so I get afraid that sometimes the consequences are physical. And I don't know if this time the consequences were physical for this person that I knew, but I know that, you know, they're forcing them to disconnect from people, and it's just like that's a big oof, you know, like that's crazy, and it's like, what the fuck? Or why would you do this? You know, and this is something that I care about. This is my friend. I worry about that. You know, it's funny too, cause man, I just think about how we met and everything, and just how like that complete 180 is like, oh, I don't think I can trust you. I think you're some featherweight, and it turns out it's like, oh, actually, you're pretty cool. I'm just kind of like, And then this happens. I'm just kind of like, just oof. I don't know, man. I could probably make another follow-up video about this, just talking about like chud, incel shit in general, and why I think the based quote-unquote community, these types of people are actually just crazy. I don't want to focus too much on it, but I guess the short version is that it's not the space toucans, it's you. And the problem is actually just you, and you're coping. You're using white identitarianism and wing nationalism to cope with the fact that you actually just got dealt a bad hand in life. You know, I could sit up here and say, well, you're a loser. You're a loser. I mean, you are, but sometimes that's not, it's fault of your own. If you have like bad parents or fucking bad things line you up, yeah, you can easily show up in that type of situation. There's an element of empathy required to understand people who find themselves in this precarious situation where they are reading a whole bunch of old books where their source, their origin is sketchy at best, and talking about separating the races and a whole bunch of, it just gets goofier and goofier, right? Because it's never just that, it's never just race realism, because there's might be some evidence for that. No, because if I stop there, it would make sense, right? I have to include like booty parasites that make you gay and a whole bunch of other weird shit to really sell the deal. I really gotta seal the deal and sell to you that I'm actually just insane and insanely immature, So I say I have a phone call going on in the background here, so I have to go ahead and do IRL stuff now. Wish you all the best, and I hope certain individuals that find themselves in this situation don't lose hope, don't get sad, don't cry. You're a big girl, you can do it. You just gotta think about what to do going forward. Maybe a marriage counselor can help. I don't know what to tell you, or maybe you gotta get up out of there. You gotta it's because you gotta take the power in your own hands. No man should enslave a woman and tell her what to do. Like you're a big girl. You're an adult, and adult women should be allowed to make their own decisions. But with that, I think I'm done, and yeah, that's about it. See you next time, guys.